Hello, everyone. Thank you for waiting. How are you doing? Here we are from New York. It's very cold these days in the end of this year, especially thinking about this time. Hope all is well with you under this most difficult, long, enduring, challenging time. Without freedom of seeing friends and seeing families, I especially hope that you are staying healthy, not just physically, but also mentally. Here we are in a gallery. We are more than committed to work with the artist who creates beautiful things and joyful things. And so we are very happy to host this exhibition and this project, the very last artist talk event in the end of this year. So we welcome our artist, Kenji Wakasugi, the photographer of the current exhibition artist, and we are honored to welcoming our special guest, Felice Fischer, Curator Emerita of Japanese and East Asian art at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, my dear friend and mentor and supporter to living Japanese artists. Before welcoming our guests and honoring them, I would like to go through a little guideline this time. Please set your view to gallery view to see the participants. Mute your microphone during the event. Turn your camera off. If there are any questions or comments, please feel free to type them into the comment section. This event will be from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. in New York time, followed by Q&A. Feel free to turn your microphone on and speak during the Q&A if you would like to show your face and say hello to us. Thank you. So let me first introduce about Kenji Wakasugi's work. Our current exhibition, Synthesis 2, is now up here in New York Gallery. It's until January the 7th. We have now over 40 pieces on the wall, and it's just so beautiful. Kenji Wakasugi combines views of nature he has photographed while traveling the remote regions of the world with fusuma, decorated sliding doors. These particular fusuma have been taken from a Japanese room with over 400 years of history, and his photographs have been artfully inserted into them. This represents a synthesis of opposing worlds, of interior and exterior, light and dark, stillness and motion, film and digital, old and new. Fusuma are a form of spatial device employed in traditional Japanese architecture. These sliding doors are comprised simply of wood and paper, and although flimsy and have no locks, they represent a spiritual boundary, separating one side from the other absolutely. Japanese rooms are not divided physically with walls, but spiritually using fusuma. This allows people to interact freely with the space. Sometimes removing these fusuma to create a large hole or reinserting them to produce a small room. Fusuma also respond gently to nature, reflecting the 4 seasons. The pale brush and ink paintings illuminated by midday's light, reflecting off the tatami mats on the floor, the gold and silver leaf in designs that appear to float bewitchingly in the light of the moon, all transmitting the poetic charm of the period. The 16th century artist Kanō Eitoku sublimated these household fittings into art through his magnificent brushwork, and the Japanese people experienced a microcosmos of nature through these paintings, in which a unique two-dimensional expression of the worlds unfolds. This synthesis of art and nature on the doors dividing a space may be said to spring from the Japanese views of life and death. Wakasugi says that poetic sentiment exists in the space between memories. Using digital technology to boldly remove the paintings applied to the fusuma by the artists of the past, he carefully replaces them with his own photographs, creating a time and space that does not exist in reality, thereby challenging the past. Now what you're seeing is from his recent project of fusuma photographs into this current direction using this calligraphy size washi print. It's gonna be a beautiful scroll and a very precious texture with even colors and some pigments. It's a very new direction now you are seeing. So let us welcome Felice Fischer, our special guest today, Curator Emerita of Japanese and East Asian Art at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Officially retired from the museum spring in 2020, now Curator Emerita of Japanese and East Asian Art, working on a museum longer-term project, Highlights of Japanese Art at the Philadelphia Museum of Art book, to be published spring in 2023. Hi, Felice, and hi, Kenji. How are you?
Hello.
Hello.
Very well, thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, good morning, Kenji. It's early in the morning. Hi, how are you?
こんにちは。
元気ですか、若杉さん。おはようございます。
おはようございます。
So, we had an exhibition opening in December 3rd, and Kenji was miraculously could fly in from Tokyo to New York for a period of time, and we had a wonderful time together. And we couldn't meet Felice at that time due to this situation, but Felice, why don't you take over the dialogues now?
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for inviting me to join you and Kenji today, and for this opportunity to meet Kenji for the first time, even though not in person, unfortunately. But as you know, I saw his exhibition in 2016 in your gallery 5 years ago and admired his work so that we were moved to, thanks to the donation of a committee member of the East Asian Art Advisory Committee, we were able to commission a work by Kenji for the 100th anniversary of our tea house.
若杉さん、フェリスは実際ではないですけども、こうやってお会いできて嬉しかったです。そして5年前に初めてあなたの展覧会をニューヨークの一方堂ギャラリーで見たときに大変感銘を受けて、その後翌年の100周年の自分の茶室のプロジェクトにフィラデルフィア美術館のスンカラクという茶室のための作品をコミッションさせていただきましたこと、本当にありがとうございました。
こちらこそどうもありがとうございます。もうフレさんに会えて本当嬉しいです。
He's very honored to meet you, Felice.
Thank you.
So let's talk about the Sunkaraku Tea House. Would you start?
Yes, to give your guests an idea of why it was so important to commission this work, I wanted to give a little background of the history of our tea house. This is, many of you are probably familiar with the tea house set in the Japanese garden galleries on the 3rd floor of the museum. This is what it looks like today. It was acquired actually in 1928, and it was part of a program to include architecture in the museum as to create a context for the art of Asia. It was a program started by Langdon Warner, who you will see on the next slide, who was people are not aware, I think, that he was the director of the Philadelphia Museum of Art from 1917 to 1923. And he acquired the first Asian architectural unit for the museum in 1919, a temple hall from an Indian temple in South India. He left the museum in 1923, but his successor, Fisk Kimball, in building a new building, planned and expanded this idea of a walk through time and geography to give the architectural context for the art of the world that visitors would see. And it was through Langdon Warner remained advisor to the museum even after he left to teach at Harvard for the rest of his professional career. But he introduced the curator at the time, Horace Jain, to a man named Takahashi Soan, who was a tea man, but also, more importantly, documented many of the important tea objects and tea ceremonies of his time in the late 19th and early 20th century. He's pictured here in 1928, the year that he introduced Horace Jain and Langdon Warner to the owner of the Sunkaraku Tea House, Ogi Keiichiro, or Ogi Rodo, seen here in the Sunkaraku Tea House at the tea master's host's seat when it was still in Tokyo. He built this, he was an architect of tea houses for many of the members of the Mitsui conglomerate at the time, but this was a house he built for himself in his tea garden in Tokyo, which you will see in the next slide. It consisted of two houses. This is the actual tea room, and then in the back of the garden is the yoritsuki, sometimes called the waiting room or guest house. Guests usually sit on the veranda admiring the garden and waiting for the host's signal to enter the actual tea room. And it's also used for sort of relaxing breaks in between the tea ceremonies or serving a light meal. And this room also, the yoritsuki, also has an art alcove, a tokonoma. And this is what I thought would be an important area where we could introduce a contemporary element into traditional art. The tea house was dismantled, as is possible for Japanese structures of wood with skilled joinery, and then reconstructed in the museum's galleries, as shown in the next slide. Here it is under construction, and though we don't have room for fusuma, you will recall perhaps in 2015, we had an exhibition of the arts of the Kanō school, which an example of one of the works by Kanō Tanyu will be shown in the next image. This is also sliding doors, as you can see from the handles here, and was created by Tanyu for Nijo Castle. It was one of his more spectacular productions with that eagle on the aged pine branch to bring the outside indoors and to show the power of the daimyo in being able to afford such a commission. So when I saw, as you'll see in the next image, in 2016, next slide, please, the images of the fusuma that Kenji Wakasugi had created from the buildings at the Sankeien in Yokohama, I immediately thought this would be a wonderful opportunity for introducing a contemporary photograph into the tea house in the form of a scroll for the yoritsuki. And the resulting image in the next slide is this spectacular photo of a temple in a cliffside called the Nage-ire-do. And it's, here's a close-up of the fantastic view from below, the valley below. And it was mounted in traditional style as a hanging scroll, as you'll see in the next slide. Here it is installed in the tokonoma. The printing by Douglas Dubler, who you'll meet later, was done on handmade Japanese paper. And the beautiful subtle mount was chosen by Keiko Aono, the owner of the original Ippodo Gallery in Tokyo. And there's one more view of the tokonoma from the outside. This is what museum visitors will see from the garden side. And I think it was a wonderful way to help celebrate the tea house. And it's on view now if you go to the museum, which is open, and you can enjoy it from the garden in the galleries.
It is, thank you. I had a trip in this fall that I visit you, and it was a very beautiful trip, and then encounter again with this scroll in Philadelphia in your museum in this tea house with this history. It was even more dramatic to me to rediscover the beauty of Kenji's scroll here. And then it's hard to see. This looks like a kind of old and ancient, but it is contemporary work. So this is the very amusing part in this show. So Kenji Wakasugi-san、今フェリスからこの茶室の歴史をお話しくださって、そして投げ入れ堂っていうものに注目されて取った経緯についてお聞きしたいというふうにおっしゃってます。いかがでしょうか。
投げ入れ堂というのはやはりこう古い日本の歴史を語ってくれるところであって、やっぱりそういうものをやはり、茶室の掛け軸に、取れたらいいなと思って、それで取るように結局、鳥取県に旅をしました。
So he was very overwhelmed by this project and very honored and privileged to make one piece to the museum and to Felice Fischer. And he was looking for an old place. He was looking for areas where ancient and steep mountains and valleys remain, because it should be a special place, it should be a memorable place. And then he was looking for places that would tell him about the history of Japan. And then he found this place, which is in October 2016. He heard about this Mitoku Mountain Sambutsuji Temple in Tottori Prefecture, an ancient temple of the Tendai sect. その時のどうやってどういう崖っぷちでどんな状況でしたか、最初に来た時は。
ですね、とにかくこの弥徳山の投げ江戸に行くにはすごく大変な道のりで。
So this was a very hard process him to access to this almost a cliff rock mountain. And it was almost a kind of challenge to go to this Mitoku Mountain.
その険しい危険な山道を登っていった時にですね、この垂直に切り立った断崖絶壁の中のですね、その亀裂の中にですね、この古いお堂が迫って見えたんですね。
From the back of the Sambutsuji temple, I climbed up the dangerous mountain roads and mountain rocks of Mitoku Mountain. And I felt as if I had wandered into an unknown place, and I was startled, like a shaking, like a shivering. It just so overwhelmed.
この古びたお堂っていうのは、幾本ものね、細い柱で支えられた、それで優美な投入堂っていうのかな、これがですね、宙に浮くように、浮かんでいたんですね。
And then my feet trembled, and that's when the old temple suddenly appeared in front of me from the rocky cave on the cliff, and my feet trembled. I felt as if I were being invited into the temple, and it was the rustic atmosphere of something that had endured more than 1,000 years of wind and snow. Its mysterious presence just attracted me. And you said the English. So this whole temple is called the Nageiredo, which means throw in hole. It was built in the late Heian period, start from 794 to 1185, and it has remained unbroken for over 1,000 years.
この投げ入れ戸というのはですね、下からこう仰ぎ見るような、仰ぎ見てそれで拝むような、そういう感覚で立っているんですね。で、だからそれがすごくその神様みたいな雰囲気で、僕の目の前にあったんですね。で、だからすごくこの瞬間、僕は思わず手を合わせてしまったんですね。
So I see. It was over the very top side of the cliff and in the cave. So naturally, he wanted to worship it. His actually reaction was just immediately to feel some stronger spirits or some god, and just that was the first impression in front of that temple.
で、写真をですね、三脚に据えてですね、それで覗き見たときですね、このやはり投入堂というのはね、下から仰ぎ、それで拝むような建物があるということをですね、実際にその時感じたんですね。で、やっぱりこんな危険な垂直な断崖絶壁に立っているということはですね、やはりこう日本一危険な場所にある、そして優美な国宝であるということを改めて感じてですね、僕はもう胸が熱くなりました。
So this is the national treasure actually in Japan. It's a Buddhist temple. but at the same time, he realized that how it is almost miracle that it stands on the edge of the cliff, like a 90-degree. And then if he think about it, then thousands of years of history here. And he was just mesmerized and then just shivering. And then he brought his tripod in this very dangerous location himself. He actually, interesting tip from me, but he used to use not tripod because he's very active photographer, but somehow Douglas Dubler, he's on board in this audience, but taught him like the importance of that tripod. And so he carried the tripod and almost like you use the rope. Kenji, rope でこう登っていったんですか? So you use the rope and just almost a chain, and then climb up onto the very right eye level. And then he also mentioned that according to folklore, the temple was created by Enno Gyoja, the founder of mountain worship in Japan. And he threw a temple into a cliff with his dharma power. Therefore, it is called nage-ire-do, throw in hole. And then he said, I wanted to capture the time of more than 1,000 years and its presence on the scroll and create a scroll of the nage-ire-do immediately to the Museum of Philadelphia Museum of Art.
この投げ入れをですね、撮影した後ですね、まだその許可を取っていなかったので、急いで、山から下ってですね、それでこう、三徳寺ので三仏寺のですね、ご住職にですね、直接会ってですね、それで、許可を得て、それで掛け軸を作るようになりました。で、このご住職のこのご住職の名前っていうのは米田さんという方で、やっぱりその時に喜んでくれて、ぜひということで、僕もよろしくお願いしますみたいな形で、それで、許可を得て、掛け軸を作ったわけです。
He at that time had no permission to take picture, but when he visited and he asked the Jushoku chief priest, Mr. Yoneda, the Yoneda-san was very thrilled and then accepted and very happy about this commission work to the Philadelphia Museum of Art. So Felice, I would like you to go on to the next question because the story is so interesting, but I would like to have your directions as much as we want.
Yes, thank you. It is such a remarkable story of this image. And I think Kenji himself became a mountain ascetic climbing there with his 4x5 camera. It's quite unbelievable, a true pilgrimage in the name and service of art. Very admirable and wonderful to hear about. I'd also like to mention that thanks to Kenji's talking to the head priest at the temple, the fitted box that was made for the scroll is actually inscribed by the head priest. So thank you for that also, Kenji.
どうもありがとうございます。
And I enjoyed the emphasis of the interplay of the natural scenery and the architecture, which is so much an element of Japanese culture and architecture, whether it's a tiny garden at a tea house or this tremendously impressive cliff with the almost impossible structure hanging off the cliff.
その崖の岩のね、ディテールとその木の構造のコントラストがとても面白い、素晴らしい。つまり自然と建築っていうものが相互に作用している。ここにやはり面白みがあるんじゃないかと思っているということですね。Let's talk about the Sankeian, that he's actually architectural pictures, resource and significant place to create his work, Sankeian.
Yes, I was very interested also because the images of the fusuma that Kenji created were for buildings that were moved by Hara Sankei around the same time as our tea house was built in 1917, 1918 to his private residence in Yokohama in order to preserve them and rebuild them. And it's part of the, I think because buildings are made of wood and because of the joinery, they can be very easily moved, not only parts reused, but entire buildings moved, which is another very Japanese phenomenon, this kind of repurposing and reusing of architecture and setting it into a garden, into a natural setting, man-made nature to offset and to complement the architecture. The interplay of inner and outer spaces is very important.
その古い建物の一部をね、保存して、そして再利用すると、その内と外との関係、そしてその日本建築の特徴から、襖っていうのは、ある意味建築要素でありながらも、でも芸術でもあると。で、襖っていうのは自然や人の力で建物の一部がもし破壊されてしまっても、簡単に襖っていうのは取り外すことができて、新しい環境で再利用することができて、その襖の表面っていうのは無限の魅力を持っていると。で、そこにですね、焦点を当てて、若杉さんが襖の表面に新しい美のレイヤーを追加した。その、もし加納探幽がこの時代に生きていて、今日仕事をしていたら、もしかしたら彼もデジタルで何かやったかもしれないねっていうことですね。いや、
それはすごくそうだと思います。で、それに結局自分の味を加えてですね、融合したんだと思います。
He agrees that your point, Felice, that about if Tanyu is alive and he would use the technology what he has. And it's about the fusion, it's about the synthesis, and whichever the artist can engage with nature, this is what he wants to do.
Yeah. I was also interested in the 2016 catalog. Kenji cites Tanizaki Junichiro's In Praise of Shadows as an aesthetic influence on his work. And I'd be interested to hear more about that.
その若杉さんがどうしてその写真作品のイメージの土台に襖を使おうと思ったのか。そしてそのさらに谷崎潤一郎の陰影来さんの影響を挙げておられるけれども、そういうその関わり、ちょっとそのあたりを襖と陰影の話を聞かせてほしいと。
ですね、僕が最初にこの臨春閣のを訪ねた時にですね、もちろん許可を得てるんですけども、室内はですね、今も伝統はなくですね、その自然光のままにその保存されている重要文化財なんですね。
When he visited Renshukaku Palace in Sankeian in Yokohama, he got first permission and then he got entered. At that time, he discovered that there was no such electric light or even outlet. It is purely still with only natural light.
いわばですね、結局、極端に言っちゃうと、江戸時代と同じ光の中でですね、の まあまあ保存されているんです。
So
それで
he
そこに
understands this is the same light source and same situation from the Edo period. It's natural light.
それでですね、そこにはその加納探幽とかです、加納探幽さんのですね、そういう襖絵なんかあるんですが、例えばその自然光で見るわけですから、例えばその庭の光がですね、畳に反射してですね、その光が加納探幽さんのですね、襖絵にですね、すごく陰影を作りですね、奥行きを深めるんですね。その移ろいゆく刻々と移りゆく光景にですね、やはり見る人の心に何かを語りかけてくるんじゃないかと。で、そういう襖の中に自分もですね、自分の撮ってきたその、風景をですね、入れてみたいと思ったんですね。つまりこれは陰影財産の場所っていうのか、そういう。
So as Felice pointed out, and then his inspiration source, of course, is this Tanizaki Junichiro's Inye Daisanda in Praise of Shadow. The Fusuma's characteristic and then the aesthetics is about that using the natural light and then appreciate the surface of the Fusuma, which is reflected from the natural light from tatami mat, and then also this boundary is next room to next room and next room and next room. So it's like a story to profoundly getting into next room to next room, which creates a different world and dimensions in a space. And also 襖は橋っていうようなこともおっしゃってますよね。
そうですね。そうですね。
So the fusuma, the sliding door, is not just a door, but a bridge into the different world. This fusuma is a connector from here to the next room. So it's a kind of boundary and it's a bridge. And he's just inspired by this element of the Japanese architecture and concept and our sensibility in the space.
結局ですね、2つの襖っていうのは、異なる2つの世界をつなぐような、融合するような、そういう役目を果たしてるんではないかと僕は思ってるんですよ。例えば外と内側、それから、天と地、西洋と東洋、いろいろありますが、そういう2つのものを融合するような、そういうなんていうのかな、仕掛けっていうのか、そういうふうな空間を区切るっていうのかな、空間をつなぐっていうのかな、そういう役目があるんです。
Fusuma has a special role, not only just making a boundary between, but also connect between. It's the two different worlds are fusioned, like inside world and outside world, or even the above sky and on the ground, like you can see the sky when you're inside of the room, which is grounded, but it allows us to connect with nature, and even east and west, those different two worlds, even ordinary world and extraordinary world, can be also together if you open this sliding door. Like for example, he also shared with me the story when he was in Japan in child. In the entry area of the Japanese house, kids are playing and have some ordinary lives and sounds going on. But at the another side of the sliding door, which has a very serious ceremony going on. So it allows us in Japan, in the space, the fusuma door can be very flimsy without any lock, or kind of compare with a Western brick house with a heavy brick and stone houses, which has a somehow respect for boundary. And at the time, he also enjoyed the sound through the next room, or you have an imagination to think about another room. Even though you can open easily, he couldn't do it, but it's a kind of a respect, and you know, it's a very interesting experience he has been enjoying when he was a child. He one day told me about the story. そしてやっぱりその隙間っていうか、襖が持ち出すその隙間だとか、光の入り方もやっぱり違いますよね、襖が。
そうですね。結局、襖というのは、襖絵っていうのは、見る角度や立ち位置や、襖というのはスライディングドアですから、片一方にどちらかにこう開いたときに、また奥の襖絵が見えてくるんですね。そういう重なりが結局その奥を作っていく。日本独特の奥の意識がこの中に、この日本の家屋の中にはあるんではないかと僕は思うんですけども。
So in Japanese and Chinese character, when we write fusuma, sliding door, which has the part oku, in Japanese, oku, which means back, which means fusuma is about opening next room and opening next room and going to the back and back and back and back. So that's the element. And it also has the element of that if the sliding door is open slightly, there is a crack, and that is the light source coming through. So it creates the very different light per time, even single moment. It changes, never the same light, and it creates the anaclasis reflection, and it be refracted by the tatami mats, or sometimes the Japanese garden outside. And so this light has making a very interesting roles, creates interesting roles compared with the artificial light or controlled light, because the Japanese house has so open to the natural light and open to the garden. Yeah. So that's a very interesting point. And then he also mentioned about that's why the fusuma painting can be appreciated every moment differently. Night and then afternoon is different, morning and then daylight is early morning, and then day is different. So he believes this is the kind of a bounds and the extreme beauty of Japanese fusuma.
僕が思ったのは、やはり昔とは江戸時代っていうのはやっぱり電気がなかったのでね、やはり画家たちは日差しやですね、月の明かりとかですね、そのろうそくの光の中でですね、絵を描いていたんだと僕は思いますね。そうでないと、やはりその奥行きも出ないし、光のその入ってくる具合も考えながら襖絵を描いていたんじゃないか。掛け順もそういうものですね。
So he imagines that because of the time there was no electric light in the nighttime and even in inside, and so the painter only used light from the sun or moonlight or candlelight. So that created a different sense of depth in the painting. different direction to create the depth of the work. That is a unique point that he want to point out. Felice, how do you think about this fusuma as your expert of the Japanese painting, and how do you perceive his point?
Well, I'm very interested to hear Kenji's speaking about light and shadow, which of course are an important part of photography, especially in his beautiful black and white images. Fusuma, he speaks of them as opening views to the interior, to the oku, but they also, to me, represent a kind of framing device. They're in frames themselves, and part of the synthesis of his work is that he is using the frame of the fusuma to project his photography. Ernest Fenollosa in the 1880s used Western-style frames for Kanō Hogai's paintings as part of his idea of synthesis of East and West, of traditional Japanese techniques and a Western-style frame. And Kenji's camera itself is a frame, and I'd be interested to hear how he sees through the camera and what he wants the viewer to perceive as he is framing his views.
So, 結局そのフェノロ It's okay, thank you. It's a very important question. So, 例えばそのフェノロサが水墨画を洋画の額縁に入れてね、その和と洋の美学を合成したシンセシスした普遍化したように、若杉さんのカメラもすでにフレーミング、何かをこう縁取るというフレーミングの装置であり、また襖もまた縁取っていくというフレーミングそのものであると。でさらにその室内から庭を眺める、これもまた内と外とフレーミングしている。そしてそのまた統合していく、一体化していく。このなんだろう、そのフレーミングという感覚についてどういう考えを思ってますかっていう。
すごくその感覚っていうのは難しいんだけども、例えばこの鶴の写真でもですね、
For example, this cranes that he took pictures.
どの鶴の結局その外から入ってくる光に合わせて鶴の写真を作品を入れてるわけです。
He wanted to make a matching cranes with this natural light environment, which is Japanese house. So he had to plan to take pictures of the cranes with matching this architectural photo.
だからこのですね、この室内のですね、この空間がですね、例えばここに別なものを持ってきたとするとですね、全く違う、作品になってしまうし、またこの空間がですね、別なものを作品を持ってきたときにですね、やはり拒否してしまう。この写真じゃダメだよという、そういう空間が言ってくる、僕に。それでいろんな作品。
He tries the inserting the different landscape picture in this frame. Sometimes the space, which is architectural photography here, space reject this landscape image as a frame, no, this doesn't match.
それはやはり江戸時代のですね、画家がですね、その光やですね、光の入り方とかですね、畳から反射する光を考えてですね、どんな絵を描こうかなと思ったようにですね、僕もどんな写真を入れたらいいのか、どんな風景を入れたらいいのか、それがその山とか川とかそういうものなのか、動物なのか、そういうことを、鳥なのか、そういうことを考えて、いろんなことを考えて、ようやく、この鶴の写真がここに来るという、そういう、まあ、
So he tries sometimes the mountains is okay, or river should be okay, or birds can be okay, or any other creatures can be okay. He tries and he imagines and he tried to visualize and try to make in this frame, which is fusuma. So that's his process. And as you, Felice, pointed out, that's his actually approach.
Are the outside images also photographs, or is that actual scenery?
Actual scenery. So in this photo, the framed one is only the crane part. And I love this, those leaves from winter windows coming through and left over on this tatami mat, which is very poetic and so nice. I like it.
Yeah. It calls for a haiku.
Exactly. Sentimental, yes.
Yes, I find all of Kenji's images are very poetic, and in my mind, I find it very related to Japanese literature in the classical tradition. And does he write poetry himself? Does Kenji write poetry?
作品を見ていると、若杉さんの作がとてもポエティック詩的であり、俳句を感じたり、日本の文学を感じますと。若杉さん自身は何か文学というか、何か文章を書くんですかって詩を読んだりするんですかって。
僕はそういうのを書かないですね。だから僕は
He does not write. I'm sorry. He reads, but he does not read. I'm sorry. He doesn't read, but he does not write haiku or poems. What I understand is that his expression is through his camera and through his photographs. So his poems are in his pictures. So
yes, they're marvelous, very, very lyrical and moving. I wonder, what is Kenji's next project, or what is he working on now?
若杉さん、次は何をしていこうと思ってますかっていう。
ですね、次はですね、どうしようかなと考えてるんですけども、実はですね、どう言ったらいいかな、表現、いろんなものを表現したいと思うんですが、表現におけるですね、その材料の制約みたいなものをですね、取り払いたいと、そう思ってるんですね。
So he always wants to express something, but for the materials of the expression, he would like to break any boundaries. So even he himself now recently called not photographer, but artist. So he does not need to be photographer. He wants to be artist. So he would like to break any boundaries to the material of the materials.
とりあえずですね、何よりもですね、やっぱり表現を中心に据えたいっていうのがあってですね、例えば、作品を描くときですね、まず自分の描きたいそのイメージがあってですね、それを表現するためにはですね、どのような材料があるかということをですね、研究しなきゃいけないという。で、だから初めから画材というか、まあ、材料をですね、制限してしまうとですね、そのイメージに、が制限されてしまうし、 まあ、表現の自由度っていうのが狭くなってしまうんじゃないかな。
Yeah,
だか
he does
ら、
not want to limit any mediums, which can be technique, which can be materials, which can be paper, which can be subject, but he does not want to be limiting that kind of materials, mediums, next stage, he said.
だからですね、そういう考え方、まあ、そういう作品を作るためにですね、それらをその可能にしてくれる材料とか技法みたいなものをですね、今少しずつその試行錯誤しながら探求しているわけです。で、例えば極端に言えばですね、光や影というのをですね、例えばその日本語で使う、金箔とか銀箔、あるいはですね、水や土なんかもそういうふうな金箔とかそういうのを使いたいんですけども、そういういろんなそのいろんな自分がやりたい、作品に向けて何かそこの中に自分が写真以外にですね、欲しいそういう、材料、そういうものをすごく勉強していきたいなと思ってる。
He would like to keep studying that to have this right material and mediums, and then he would like to, of course, learn about the materials such as gold leaf, silver leaf, water, even clay. He wants to be open to any kind of materials at this point, and he just wants to see a different world, like other world, isekai, the other world, which allows him to see the world except himself, except his world. He wants to beyond, and he wants to break any kind of a limit. So he himself works with two-dimensional work, but he actually in New York, when we went to the Whitney Museum 2 weeks ago, when he was here, he was so overwhelmed by the Jackson Pollock and those American oil canvases, and using the threads and the spoons, and then so he's quite open to any kinds of artwork and worlds. So this is his actually attitude, being so flexible and unbelievable. So, but I think we are timing now. It's almost 6 p.m. and we would like to also open for a Q&A session. So, but I would like to take a moment to express our heartfelt gratitude to our dear friend and our dear mentor, Douglas Dubler, who execute this exhibition possible to print this magic of the fusion work in a digital way. At the same time, he is our gallery's lighting director, and he sees light. Obviously, he is a professional photographer who has had a career spanning more than 4 decades. In his early years, he was mentored by Isamu Noguchi and Ansel Adams. Coming from this fine art background, he then was mentored by Neil Barr, who started him on the path as a fashion beauty photographer. And he was the one who printed Nageirero Tempo scroll for Felice's commission work. And he's himself my dear friend, and then he's a teacher of my photography, which I am now finding most interest in my life, taking pictures. So hi, Douglas.
Hello.
Douglas actually visited when we delivered a scroll to your museum, Felice. It was
Yes, right.
5 years ago.
Yeah. I remember it well.
As do I. Yeah, when I first saw these pictures a number of years ago, and we discussed doing an exhibition of them, I thought it was important to revisit the files technically and make them make any kind of artificial boundaries. For example, the boundary between film and digital, because the images on these screens are film, but the house itself is digital. So if you don't do something about that, these things are discordant. They battle one another. So I have a great researcher, my friend Irfan Yonak, and I sent him these files, and I had him do his own synthesis to joining those paintings, those analog film images that Kenji, those wonderful images that Kenji shot, to these interiors that were shot with the digital camera. And you might think that it looks very easy, but that's the intention is to make, when it's finished, not to leave any footprints in the snow, so to speak.
How many layers you said?
In this picture, 99.
Mm-hmm. It creates almost like a movie, almost like a Hitchcock movie in a bird, that the 3D effect when you stand in front of the photo, it's really deep. So I love this. And then Felice, how do you comment on his story?
Yeah, that's amazing. I had no idea how it was done technically. And that makes it even more remarkable and beautiful. Although I think these birds are friendlier than the Hitchcock birds. I would more happily be surrounded by these birds if sitting in a room.
Yes.
この鳥は今ヒッチコックの鳥よりはもう少しフレンドリーな鳥だといいんだけどっていうコメントでしたけど、that's so funny. Actually, these birds are quite aggressive, Felice. If you see carefully, there are so many eggs on the ground. So those mother birds are trying to protect their own baby birds and eggs. And so it was a moment that he was on the mountain, and that was a very dynamic moment. But so we would like to wrap up this conversation. It's really exciting, and we would like to continue more and more. But here we have so many wonderful participants and attendees here. If you, everybody, if you have any questions, comments, why don't you share with us now? And feel free to put your microphone on if you prefer.
I have a question. It's Rick.
Hi, Rick. How are you?
I'm fine. Hi, Douglas.
Hello, Rick. How are you?
I'm fine. I don't even know how to begin asking questions about this, but it's not just that you've matched the digital with an analog, but you've got perspective going on. And I don't believe the original photographs had those vanishing points, did they? You guys have created the sense that things are receding into the distance on images that were probably more straightforward. Am I right?
No. No,
so he took those photos thinking they would go in this shot, for instance, one group receding on the right and the other.
Oh no! When Kenji shot these birds, I will speak for him, but my guess would be he had no idea what he was going to use them for.
Yes.
But in terms of the perspective, this is done. This was Kenji's concept, and when I saw the original photographs with the work that Kenji had done, stripping the images in, I was very impressed with the overall effect of it. But I felt it could use some digital expertise. So our retoucher, Irfan Yonak, who's got 50 years experience doing this and is one of the pioneers doing this, we employed him to assemble these images together and to do it in a seamless way. So I think the way it is now, it's more reflective of Kenji's initial intention for these pieces. So
you just completely believe, you just believe the room exists somewhere. It's remarkable.
岡杉さん、今その
うん
技術的な話、いろんな質問が飛んでますけども、
うん
とりわけこの群青に関して言えば何か自分の持ってる世界観っていうか、目指した方向性っていうのはあったんですか？
ふすまというのはこういう室内空間に立体的に、あるそのパネルみたいなもので、この襖の空間に、この立体的な襖の空間にこの鳥を入れるということは、結局この鳥たちがですね、自分たちが飛んでいる、実際これマルケサスので撮ったんですけども、このマルケサスの諸島の空の上を、この空間の中、どう言ったらいいのかな、この空間の中で飛んでいる。そういう感じなんですね。
His goal on this piece is that it was the Marquesas Islands that he was in. That was a very open, high sky that he saw, and then the birds were flying in the sky, above the sky, and that over the sky kind of a atmosphere, the ambience that he wanted to even create inside of the Japanese house, which was his goal and then challenge. That was a synthesis, what Kenji wanted to vision and imagine, and then which Douglas tried to execute in a 3D way. So, I mean, this exhibition has been synthesis with many ways. You and Douglas, Kenji and Douglas, and also technology and idea and sensibilities and execution. So, Felice, we are very looking forward that to continue our conversations. But since the time is running out, Felice, do you have any last comment ending this event?
Well, this last image says it all. I think it shows you the fusuma's surround effect, its opening and closing view to the inner, and is a marvelous tribute to Kenji's skills and Douglas's skills as well. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Felice. And thank you so much, Rick, for the lovely question, which always steer us at another level of the conversation. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. The very last artist talk of this year, Ippodo present. Again, this most difficult time, we cannot see each other. I canceled my trip to Japan. I cannot see my family, friends. Even I am now remotely working with my staff members. I miss you. We are all missing each other, and but we are happy to be able to keep working with those artists and those of you who support art and artists. And we are here to be a bridge. If Kenji thinks Fusuma is a bridge to another world and connect each other, we, the gallery, is a bridge between you and artists. And we will keep working hard and sharing joys, beauties, and force for life. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful weekend and Happy New Year. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.